Fair warning before continuing this video, this narration does contain spoilers from the final part of Attack on Titan. Timestamps have been marked where each spoiler is discussed if you would like to skip them. Thanks for watching. Hello everyone, and welcome to my first, narrated video. I'm pretty sure I'm the 8th billionth person to say this, but I am not a huge fan of my voice. I'm hoping these kinds of videos might help me warm up to the idea of voiceovers, as it's something I really want to start getting into. On another note, I am recovering from a bad cold, because of course I am, so I apologize if I sound a bit nasally at times. With this piece today, I am going to talk about the decision and comfortability surrounding the choice to restart a finished piece. That last part is pretty bold, restarting a finished piece, but it's happened to me more times than I care to admit. Restarting a finished piece can be avoided with careful planning and preemptive measures to at least remain confident in a satisfactory finished product, but that isn't always the case, and sometimes it's just inevitable. So many things can happen. Your idea takes a wrong turn that's difficult to come back from, your rendering goes so poorly, but you keep pushing through hoping, maybe if I just ignore it, it will fix itself. Or maybe the references you're using simply took the piece in a direction you realized didn't work. I think in my case with this piece, it was a variable mix of all of these issues. Here you can see I'm working on a portrait of Mikasa from Attack on Titan. This is actually my second attempt. Here I will show you what the first attempt had been. As you can already tell, the composition has drastically changed from a 3/4 view to a front-facing view. Even her expression has changed. Though still clearly saddened, it's evolved from an almost shocked, wide-eyed kind of sadness to a more empty and almost acceptant gaze. My thought process to make these changes wasn't as convoluted as one might think, but first, let's take a look at why I didn't agree with the outcome of the first piece. I broke it down into 3 main points. Who am I drawing? What emotion am I trying to convey? Does this piece properly express both of these things in the way that I'm happy with? The first answer is fairly straightforward. I'm drawing Mikasa Ackerman. What that means to me is I've taken an anime character with a very specific look and I'm adapting her into my realistic human style. Stylization in feature adaptation is an entirely separate topic I might get into in another video, but let's focus on just Mikasa here. Does this first drawing look like her if she were to enter our world? My personal answer was no. And now, that may be subjective. Someone might look at this and go, wow, that's Mikasa. And honestly, that would make me happy. But what truly defines Mikasa's features as a character? She has a hardened, tough exterior. She's often straight-backed to exude confidence as a soldier, and the only times she really expresses emotions are with her close friends, Armin and Eren. While beautiful, she has a sharp delicacy to her features and a demeanor solidified by war. This first drawing just didn't really convey that for me. My goal with this piece, if it wasn't obvious, is to express this feeling of sadness and heartbreak Mikasa is experiencing. The piece itself is actually titled Regret. It is a second part to a currently 2-part series where Eren and Mikasa confront the reality of saying goodbye to one another due to the rumbling. Obviously, Eren's head is still intact here, but for these pieces, I wanted to represent how they might look at each other if things could be different. You can watch the speed paint of Eren's version on my YouTube channel. It has no narration, but hopefully you can enjoy the process. I'm still debating whether or not to do a part 3 with Armin. Let me know in the comments if that's something you'd be interested in. Maybe I can talk about another topic in this speed paint video. Now, back to Mikasa's piece. Because it's a series, I of course wanted the 2 pieces to be cohesive with one another. They have to look similar for them to feel connected while still expressing their individual feelings toward the situation. And here's where the fun little issue of references comes in. This was the main reference I was using to create the first piece. At first glance, it seems gorgeous, and it is. The composition is stunning, her expression of hurt and betrayal, the rose going into her neck to further nail that emotion on the head. I thought, wow, this is perfect, until I realized it wasn't what I needed at all. Only I realized far too late. You see, while it's a beautiful photo, there are key issues here when it comes to using it as a reference, specifically for the piece I'm trying to create. First, the lighting. I needed to create something similar to the dramatic, slightly off-centered lighting Eren is portrayed in here, as if they were in the same room looking at one another. What's the biggest issue with this reference photo, you might notice? Well, the lighting is completely different from what I need. The woman here is cast entirely in shadow, and while there are subtle light sources, slightly brightening up places like her nose, chin, forehead, and an obvious cool tone light coming from her left, it was drastically different from the harsher lighting setting I needed to remain consistent with. This is why choosing a reference is so important. You might look at a composition and think it's a perfect match, but are you just using it for the position of the head or the pose, or do you need to rely on its lighting and value as well? Do you need to find other references that further represent what you're trying to achieve to guide your process? Are you able to balance using both? Every process is different from piece to piece. For some, you may benefit from a ton of different references to utilize as you construct a composition or render skin. You may be forced to find multiple different poses to create something new you can't find a good reference for. We've all been there. But my issue here was I was far too reliant on this one reference, and when I got to the point of rendering light against Mikasa's skin, I realized, oops, I have absolutely nothing to fall back on except for my previous piece of Eren. And of course, his head is exactly front-facing, so light will cast differently on his features. By the way, this is the reference I used for Eren. Very dramatic, very concise. Shout out to this man. But knowing this about the reference I was using for Mikasa, I still persevered. I had the confidence that I could pull off the separate lighting on my own without a proper reference. And honestly, I don't think I did terrible, but compared to the artwork of Eren, it didn't convey that same level of sharpness and drama I was hoping for. Everything was overly soft in a way that was just mildly discomforting. And that leads us to the model herself. This stunning woman simply just does not look like Mikasa. I wanted to ensure I was highlighting her Asian features in my portrait of her, but Mikasa is also half Asian, her mother being a relative of the Azumabito family and her father a part of the Ackerman clan. There are certain features I believe her character in our world would have that this model does not. Now, knowing this, I did try to tweak a bit of her features myself to try and make it more accurate to the character. But how much can you divert from a reference or jump through hoops to alter it before realizing it might not be wise to rely on it at all? At this point, I was far too into the rendering process that I didn't want to accept the fact that I hated how it was turning out, so I kept going until I reached the end. Because I subconsciously knew I disliked it, I naturally rushed the rest of the process to get it over with, but that resulted in a piece I was highly disappointed with. I would compare it to the Eren one, which I loved, and feel like it wasn't even a part of the same world. I almost scrapped the idea of doing two parts entirely, but I felt so passionate about the heartbreaking story behind Eren and Mikasa that I was too inspired to call it quits. The piece was far too rendered and detailed for me to try tweaking it even more, so my only option at that point was, well, restarting. Taking into account what I learned from the first piece, I approached this new one completely differently. I acknowledged that the reference was a big issue, so I went on the hunt for something that more directly expressed what I needed, something specifically when it came to lighting. I found this photo and went, okay, what does she have here that I need? What does she have that I don't need? The answer to the first question was lighting and pose. While potentially not as dramatic as the reference I used for Eren, it was far more accurate to what I was looking for than the other photo was. I also realized I loved the way she was looking forward, that a front-facing angle, though the same as Eren's, was one of the key aspects I was missing to portray Mikasa. She never backed down from a challenge, and even when faced with the choice of having to kill the person she loved, she ultimately decided to do it. I felt that wasn't the demeanor of someone slouched, their front turned away and their shoulder pulled up. Mikasa would face Eren directly, even with a broken heart. I then knew this was the pose I wanted to use. This was when combining references came in handy, something I should have done from the start. I needed to utilize the Asian features and emotion of the first reference while clinging to the direct lighting of the second. This proved to be quite difficult, as their features were so different from one another. Hooded eyes versus monolid eyes, thinner lips compared to much fuller. They both had button noses though, so that was a plus. I had to carefully choose which features I drew inspiration from in order to portray Mikasa in a way I felt was accurate. After some trial and error, I finally felt like the new piece was heading in a much better direction, and the result ended up being a piece I was much more confident in. It felt she shared a room with Eren, even with the different colored background. It felt as if they were truly looking into each other with eyes filled with regret. I debated whether or not to give Mikasa a glare, but I truly felt she would look at Eren with a sense of sympathy and understanding, thinking, no, things will never be the same, and I have to let you go. At the end of the day, despite restarting having been frustrating, I learned a lot. How important it is to prioritize references, that composition doesn't mean everything, how important it is to me to portray a character that I love in a way that feels accurate and authentic, a testimony to who they are. Hopefully you guys saw where I was coming from here. Maybe some of you are comparing this new piece to the old and thinking, what the hell was going on in her head? But honestly, that's okay. The cool thing about art is it's subjective. Everyone's taste is unique. I really do love the new piece, and I feel I can really see Mikasa through it. The rest of this video is pretty much myself going through the process of rendering. If you would like a rendering video where I break down how I go from grayscale to the finished product, please let me know. I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. Let me know what you think in the comments below, whether or not I made a good call and how you feel about the changes. I certainly don't have it all figured out, but I'm looking forward to learning more as I keep going forward.
何してるの？